Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have a Constellation video for you today. That is DAG, D-A-G, on the exchange. It's a very interesting project. We've done an introductory video to this one in the past, so go check that one out after this one. We'll leave a link in the description at the end of this video. But I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on this project. It's one we haven't covered for quite some time. But someone mentioned in a comment on one of the other videos in the last few days about any updates and things from Constellation. So we'll go through a couple of topic points on this and why I was so interested in DAG in the first place as a token, but also Constellation as a project and technology. And I think we'll also go into the chart as well, just from the price point perspective, which is really interesting also, just to look at where we can get to and the current positions. And we'll look at a bit of historic data on that point as well as to some of the theories as to why we've concluded some of those. So before we go into this one, guys, don't forget, of course, to smash that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Welcome to the channel. We've gone past the 10,000 mark. Absolutely massively appreciated across the board to all of you who have ever been involved with the channel. So really massively appreciate that, and it's flying through. Go and check out the other videos as well. Loads of different interviews, different assets that we talk about. If there's one that we haven't spoken about in ages or one that we're missing completely, please do let us know and we'll try our best to get those recorded and done once I've researched, obviously. And the other point, if you could kindly smash that like button, big thumbs up, we massively appreciate it. Helps the channel grow and push out to new audiences and gain extra knowledge around there in the space. So thank you very much, guys. Let's go straight into this as a topic. So Constellation at the moment, we won't go into too much detail right now about price, but currently floating around the 3 cent mark. You can clearly see in the past round 2021 we got up to those dizzy heights of 40 cents or so. So there's plenty of movement. We'll go into that a bit more detail further on, but I just thought it was really important just to show a bit of an overview directly for those that are new to Constellation or DAG as a project, just to kind of give you a rough idea of the gain potential here in the next bull run and beyond that as well. So we'll come back to that in a second, but it's certainly a project that I've been following for some time. I actually got into most of the DAG around the sort of 15 to 20 cent mark. And I do believe that's still probably going to be a bargain as such in the future considerations. But of course, being this low down now, I didn't have a crystal ball, albeit I knew it was coming down further. I've been waiting for a bit of stability and kind of good timing really for this video in general in terms of that opportunity that's arisen. So just a bit of an overview of Constellation in the sense that it very much heavily involves itself around DAG technology. Now, I just want to be clear here. So we cover a number of other projects like Hedera and IOTA that also use DAG systems. What is this? Is a direct acyclic graph. I've always personally called it the evolution of blockchain. Constellation tend to call it a couple of different things. Essentially, DAG is the ultimate protocol naming of this, right? And it mentions it here. HGTP, this is very much around the hypergraph network. This is kind of like Constellation's methodology around that. And what it means, guys, is basically the interoperability of anything and everything system-wise. IoT, AI eventually, of course, will be fully integrated with blockchain. Blockchain in general is a DLT system. And there's loads of other corporations like cloud, APIs, etc. that pull in together. But at the moment, there's not too many things out there that can really bring all of these systems together. Hence why Constellation also brought out the metagraph philosophy, albeit metagraphs is a consistent thing across blockchain space anyway. But it's certainly something heavily involved with Constellation as a project technology that incorporates all these things at a layer zero kind of area. This means that we have the opportunity for the connection of various different chains and networks all talking to each other simultaneously in conjunction with all of the other areas of technology coming into this as well. So my kind of philosophy behind this was like, if you could imagine almost kind of like this, but even more spectrumed out, like huge. This little diagram here that's got all these dots and data points, etc. It gives a bit of an overview of how this kind of works. But my philosophy behind this is that if you imagine like thousands upon millions of these things, like data node points or network points, and these are ultimately like you as a user and your different devices that you've got. And how do we get from A to Z the quickest way possible? But in between that big, huge pathway is massive opportunities for validation and processing, verifying all these things. Hence, blockchain is massively capable of that. We've got things like the transactions per second, of course, TPS, which you might be familiarized with the abbreviation of that. And I've always said this, and sorry if this is a narrative that many of you heard before, but for those that are new, I always want to accommodate loads of different people coming into space. So these transactions per second aren't just financially related, just like me sending you money is of course a transaction, but the terminology of transaction is the transfer of an action, okay? So anything and everything we do around the internet, based the internet, or anything that we're doing with buying and selling, the whole supply chain mechanism, everything. And by the way, supply chain we'll come on to in a second is a really interesting point in some other markets that we haven't really covered too much about. But that whole orientation is that you as a user at one end, and perhaps like a manufacturer or supply chain mechanism at the other end, and in between that you get all the different intermediaries, but you might even have things like devices that are basing their operation around environmental factors, sustainability factors, or are you at home or not? Are we wasting energy? Should this be turned on, yes or no, because you've got schedules of meetings later today and we need to get your clothes washed and dried, etc. So this is why all of these appliances and things are coming into the IoT sphere. And each and every one of those conversations, I call them conversations because this is basically machine-to-machine learning to an extent, which I have massive experience in career-wise in the IoT space, the machine learning, deep learning, AI, everything in those areas. And this is why I was so fascinated about blockchain, because I did the dot connecting and was like, okay, this is how it's all going to work. I understand now, APIs, etc. So all these things talking to each other in simultaneous fashion. And you can imagine how many houses there are here in the UK. I mean, maybe 30, 40 million-ish in between that number. Then the whole rest of the world, in terms of their populations, housing, dwellings, whatever. And then all the internet devices we've got, smartphones, appliances, smart cameras, smart bulbs, heaters, anything and everything you possibly think of. And taking things out of the fridge, for example, and it automatically being ordered. But every single framework of that entire supply chain mechanism, supply and demand, what you've taken in, what you've put out, being ordered, manufactured, processed, harvested, whatever it might be, delivered by drone, by logistics, whatever, all has to communicate with each other under one roof. And this is why it becomes very fascinating with DAG technology, because we advance ourselves from that kind of linear motion of a blockchain, moving into that fraction of creating the blocks one by one, validation, processing. And even that is absolutely hugely fast, of course. But DAG takes it to that other level of node validation, the whole consensus model that we talk about. They call about proof of reputable observation. There's loads of different terminologies for all this kind of stuff. But the whole point of this is that it pulls everything together. And that's why I was so fascinated by IOTA, why I'm fascinated about Hedera for its many different reasons, which are covered in the recent Hedera video over the last couple of days. But Constellation has been around for a long time. And albeit this white paper is very old, it's still very relevant. They're still on the path of creating this magnificent infrastructure. And it's absolutely fascinating, even to the point of mathematical equations and things in here. So if you're really interested in all this sort of stuff and you understand the true mechanism, the root causes of blockchain and how it works and smart contracts, etc., it's a really fascinating read. And if you don't know, it's one of the best documents you could read to really start understanding some of the terminologies and getting used to this whole philosophy of what this is about. So I'll definitely leave a link on this. It's just off the Constellation website. But the point being is that all of these systems, these frameworks are being built, not just in financial sectors. We're talking about supply chain, transportation, anything and everything you can possibly think of. And Constellation can be one of those huge projects at layer 0 level, very much boasting a fearless aspect to this as well, by the way, guys. Let's just scroll down to the bottom here. I'm not sure how up to date this is, and I do think I don't pay too much attention to these kind of charts because it tends to, from a marketing perspective, try and stand out obviously the best things possible and maybe not matching up certain other things. But in this instance, we know how powerful obviously Ethereum is in terms of its longevity, how many projects are on that with EVM, etc. as well. But then we've got all these other chains. We know of Polkadot, Solana is obviously very powerful in their own rights as well. Cardano still developing and progressing. And Hedera we spoke about quite a lot. And all of these have massively low transactions, but with proper DAG technology, there's the argument of feeless transaction. And you can imagine how appropriate this is for businesses, technology partners, integrations across the world, how important that mechanism is. because ultimately as chains grow and scalability reduces, and this is why we talk about layer 1s, 2s, 3s, etc. coming in the near future further down the line of those levels, higher levels of layers, is purely from that fact that we haven't really fully tested the ground yet. Blockchain is still in development, it's still progressing. Yes, it's been around since 2007, since the days of Bitcoin, etc. But we're still early from the adoption and the mass awareness perspective. And it has to be scaled forwards. So some of these chains not necessarily fall off the cliff. They will evolve, they will adapt, absolutely. To say like things are Ethereum killers is utter nonsense. These companies will be around forever. Well, maybe not forever, but certainly for a long time. But what is thought about ahead of time is this aspect of, if we really need this mechanism technologically to work as time goes by and the future comes nearer, we need something that is very appropriate when it comes to transaction fees, the scalability model, how many people can actually use this simultaneously. And this is where DAG becomes very interesting indeed. There is an argument, even like with IOTA, for example, is it actually feeless? I mean, when you're talking about 0.000 many zeros before there's a 1 there, at least a 1, it's kind of like non-existent or irrelevant in your mind. But this is what they boast on their websites and everything, and it's kind of very much close to that terminology of feeless transaction. I kind of like think about it like when you like buy soap or fairy liquid or something, it says like it kills 99.9% bacteria. Well, the reason it says that is because it doesn't kill 100%, because the bacteria always comes back, but at least eliminates as much as possible. And that's kind of like how I theorize the feeless transaction terminology there. But the fact of the matter is, this is a powerful technology and project. As I said, we've done a huge intro to this, but I just want to make people aware of this. And one of the interesting topics before we go into the chart was around the defense mechanism. And what I mean by defense is obviously like, aircraft, general army, military, etc. Very interesting market. We'll go into this in a second, because the statistics around blockchain integration in defense and forces, etc. is absolutely insane. But more recently, here in May 2023, so a few months back now as of recording today, there is phase 2 contracts going on with the DoD. So this is around the defense mechanism of the US in particular, utilizing or integrating and certainly doing case studies at this phase stage of the Constellation network. Now, I know for a fact as well that IOTA are involved in certain capacities, and there's some other projects as well, not necessarily ones that you can buy on chain, but certainly this whole conversation is massive, guys. We're talking about where we talk about smart contracts, and there's a very important acts going through and laws going through, certainly here in the UK and particularly in the EU right now, about EU data and how smart contracts can be potentially terminated or utilized. This is where the topic gets really interesting, because obviously the framework of the defense model is absolutely huge, and security is probably at the major top of the list of everyone's pile when you talk about DoD functionality and integration. This is where blockchain becomes very important from that verification security perspective, and also from the supply chain mechanism as well. Not just from the transparency and the verification, but actually reducing that model, saving defense companies money. They make a lot of money anyway from tax, etc. But the fact of the matter is, anyone wants to save money here and there, of course, as much as they can, whether that's reduction in resource and the utilization of digitalization coming further more forward. And that is very much orientated around the recent conversations that we had in the UK, where we've got law going through about trade finance, digitalization, cryptocurrency, digital currencies, etc., being actually a reliable source of finance and currency to be used by law, and the US is doing the same. So all of these things are ticking the boxes, very convenient at similar times, and all these phases, these pilot systems, whether it be CBDCs or these kind of infrastructure contracts, are coming towards their end ethos of learning more, knowledge-based development, and now integration, where millions upon millions of dollars is being thrown at this. And I remember reading a while back, in fact some of it might even be here, the US Air Force poured over $30 million quite recently into blockchain as a service provider. This was using Simba chain. There's actually mentions in here about IOTA as well, which is another project that I hold and talk about quite a lot on the channel. I think it's fascinating. But yeah, 3 key points here: procurement, fractionalization, licensing, secure system access. So 3 huge pillars there when it comes to defense mechanism, potentially saving money, potentially improving the efficiency of supply chain as well, and all the other scalability factors and data factors, security factors that get thrown into that as well. It's huge. But look at this, guys. This is where I get really excited as an investor, where I'm like, okay, cool. We understand the technology, we understand the project. What's the utility? Cool, we get a bit of an understanding about that. But what's the actual market value? Now, we're not saying these numbers are dedicated to Constellation as such, but when you know that they're in phase 2 and final conversations with, massive, forces systems such as the US defense, etc., it becomes very clear in my mind. The global blockchain in aerospace and defense market was estimated to be around $3.27 billion in 2023. There's an estimated 45.64% increase in this value to reach 47.29 billion by 2030. That is absolutely insane, guys. Absolutely insane. Of course, there's loads of things, macro events going on around the world, where things are becoming even more speedier, the integration of AI, the integration of autonomous vehicles, etc. Again, going back to my point, whether it be supply chain of weaponization or anything like that, all talking to each other simultaneously on the frameworks, no procurement aspects. So many people work in bidding, by the way, in contracts and procurement in defense. Imagine how much money saving and resource saving you could do with the utilization of blockchain, AI, and IoT working together. And we know for a fact that, of course, many vehicles, etc., are going the autonomous way, aircraft especially, with the application of drones, etc., and all these things going on around the world. It's very interesting timing, guys. Very interesting timing indeed. And you can kind of understand how, if you want to go down this automated route and this more efficient route, blockchain integration, AI, IoT are extremely important in those factors, which is kind of really what else, on top of everything else, accommodates these huge number increases in market value size. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal to look at it in this way and get a bit of a picture as to, okay, I'm investing in these systems, or at least the tokenization behind these systems, which will be used within their own frameworks for developers, node creators, validators, etc. This is how it all mostly works. And that's how you start getting the representation that more of this stuff's going to be needed, and therefore the price will increase over time. As I'm sure models will change over time as well, will reflect those prices in fluctuation patterns, as we've seen. But there will come a time where the markets do have to almost pretty much detach themselves from your market orientation. But then, there's an argument to say that companies buy shares or products or whatever from other companies based on the existing price points. And there's no real difference really to going, oh, actually, we need to buy an X amount of DAG tokens because we need to develop this framework for our system in the aerospace defense market. And it's literally a digitalization of what we're doing already. I say we, all these companies, these levels of organizations. So it ticks in your mind. It starts making you think. And I'll leave a link to this. I won't go into massive detail about this. It was a PwC document. It's from 2020, I think. It's a couple of years old, or a few years old. But just a really nice, interesting overview about the application of blockchain in the aerospace defense organizations. And it's really interesting to see a bit more of a breakdown of those 3 pillars that we spoke about, and a few other things added to this, to draw a really conclusive story around the interest behind this. What can cryptocurrency or cryptography and blockchain really apply to this market? And there's loads of other markets, of course, we talk about in many different videos all the time, but I thought this was an interesting one because we don't really talk about this sector much at all. But I was absolutely staggered by the market share, or the market opportunity value-wise, just from blockchain integration. So hopefully you guys find that interesting. But it's a good wrap-up point there, guys, to go into a bit of the chart conversation around Constellation. There's always interesting things going on there as well, but hopefully we'll learn something there. Let's talk about the price point of Constellation. So currently floating, as I mentioned to the moon in the beginning of this video, around 3 cents. Now, as I said, I was purchasing most of it between 15 and 20 cents. I'm still pretty pleased with that. I always DCA into projects anyway, but yes, obviously in hindsight now, that looks quite pricey. But the point being, I wanted to mention this. The last bull run we had in 2021 took Constellation's DAG token from all the way lower prices around roughly very close to where we are today. Around 2020, by the way, it was around about sort of like 1 or 2 cents. So again, we're in a middle mark here, because by 2021, it did reach heights of roughly around 6 to 10 cents. But my point being is here, the current price point up to the previous all-time highs that we saw back up here is a staggering 1,300-ish% gain from this point onwards. Now that just shows you the massive opportunity here from current positions that we could accumulate from in this current stage. So that's definitely something to look forward to, especially if you're new to DAG or you're accumulating. It puts things into a bit of perspective, and that's not to say that that's where it stops. Ultimately, if we look at those long-term fib retracement levels, at least one of the key target points to be matching towards is all the way up here. Let me just put in my little drawings quickly, if I can find my brush, is up here, 82 cents roughly. Now that would be fantastic from this current point. Even if I was buying them at 15 cents, that's why I don't panic too much. I look at the longevity of things. I'm not here personally to trade short term or mid term. I'm here for the long run because I see the potential, certainly by 2030. We just mentioned one of them. But the other staging points up here over the $1 mark to 125, we'll have to see how that plans out. But at the moment, that's a really interesting target. And I think it's definitely achievable in the next bull run, at least 74 cents. So of course, from the current point of price that we're at, taking up to those kind of levels is about 2,200% gain. Huge, absolutely huge. But I'm just going to reflect it back to that existing all-time high at least, because I do think that's definitely achievable in the next run as more awareness builds, more application utility increases as well. And one thing to mention, the performances on the right hand side here really reflect the position that we are with right now with DAG. So obviously most markets are down, understandably. We're in the bear, the winter market, etc. But this puts into perspective in my head that actually, yes, there's still some selling going on right now. It's still unstable. And there's an opportunity here, which is why I've drawn this rectangle, taking loads of old loads of old data points all the way back here in 2020 to give you a better reflection on where we've been. So you can see in this uprise, albeit not too long as 2 or 3 months worth, it dragged itself back down to this area to almost pretty much retest this sort of 2.7/3 cent mark, i.e. roughly around where we are there today. We had the big gap here with the big bull run. Most markets have this similar pattern, but my point being is that there's a limited amount of support data here. And we see that in some cases on the resistance levels as well. But from a support mechanism, we're still messing about with this. And that's why I've drawn this rectangle in, because we will probably no doubt touch these lower points again at 2.5 cents. And it's reflecting itself, bouncing up and down, particularly around these current areas, which is why I'm so interested at this DCA opportunity at its current price point of around this 3 cent mark. Because yes, it could break that barrier. It could come back down. Let me just move this rectangle to make it a bit more clearer. So obviously more recent times back here in June, we did reach down to around sort of 2.7-ish cents. So there's an opportunity for that to happen again as we stabilize perhaps for a few days around this current area where we are today. And maybe drop back down to retest. Why? Because we don't have enough data points at these lower regions to go, okay, cool, DAG is ready to go. There's a foundation, there's enough holders, there's enough confidence in there for us to stabilize and retest properly the higher areas. This is why, as we see this developing pattern downwards, of course, in amongst this, you've got a load of day traders, weekly traders, etc., maybe even on the month stage, which is why you have these fluctuating up and down patterns. The announcements and things haven't been too much. Even that one back in May didn't have too much of a fluctuation pattern upwards about defense contracts, etc. So this is why I'm interested and very topical. Thank you to the person that mentioned DAG, because it is actually coincidental that, albeit I am DCAing manually, it's a good point to make that these are really interesting areas of accumulation potentially. It's not financial advice, just me, my opinions, and what I'm doing personally as well. Final remarks, the RSIs on the left-hand side, bottom here, guys. 14 days showing 31, 20 days showing 41. These are very low numbers. These are great bite points. As many of you have watched my videos, I do focus a lot on various different data points in charts and analysis. And I think the RSIs are just as important because they confirm the visualizations that we see. And we can argue that, 30 up to, in terms of the spectrum, guys, for those that don't know, obviously 100, 0 to 100, 30 very much in there's around 30%. So you have more upward movement opportunity than downward. That's not to say it won't come down slightly lower, but you remove some of the aspects of risk. And this is why I DCA at these kind of areas, because I'm like, okay, it might come down lower. maybe a half a cent or something like this, unless it completely destroys itself and jumps back down to 1 cent. Possible, absolutely, but even to that point, the registration of the RSI is lower than it would be the other way around. And it's the same for the 28-day, and the 90 days are showing good strength or stability at least. I know we see negative on the right hand side, but the numbers aren't too bad, and that indicates to me that, okay, even from a trader who's perhaps doing this weekly or on a monthly status, those are good reflective patterns as well. I would like to see that 90-day coming down slightly more, in the 28-day just shifting a bit further down to 40, but that's where I think over the next few days, if we stabilize around this 3.2 cent mark-ish, that's where I think those numbers will start dragging down, and then we will see a definition of retesting this low area potentially, or it will do a retaliation on this line that we're currently at and start bouncing around these sort of 3.5 and maybe retesting higher levels than that as well. So you can start seeing the pattern based on your different strategies that you might have. I'm a long-term holder, as I said, so for me it's not a giant issue, but I do love accumulating at these lower areas compared to where I was originally buying in at, of course, understandably. But hopefully this whole conversation has opened up DAG Constellation to your minds. I'll try and make more appearances of Constellation on the channel as more things develop. But yeah, amongst the YouTube shorts, I'm going to try and do some daily shorts about price analysis, quick minute snapshots, because there's so many assets to go through. I have fairly limited time, albeit I am going more time driven into the channel for you guys, but I'm trying to do my best, and it's just very hard to obviously go like, this asset, and they're all changing all the time every day. So I'll do my best to try and accommodate these kind of things daily as well in short fashion. So keep an eye out for those. Guys, that very much wraps up the conversation around DAG. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. We'll very much see you, hopefully, in the next Constellation video. Take care. Bye-bye.